Uhuru. Uhuru, everybody. Welcome to this special event tonight. The revolution will not be white-led, a call to white people to join under the leadership of the African Revolution, hosted by the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. My name is Jesse Neville. I have the great honor of being the national chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. And I want to welcome all of you who have joined us tonight. Thank you so much for being here. And I want to start by saying that the organization hosting this event, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, is the organization of white people formed by and led by the African People's Socialist Party, the Revolutionary Party of African workers inside the US and around the world, fighting Black power, fighting for self-determination, fighting to end the colonial domination of African people that is evident in the treatment of African people by the police, mass incarceration, and every other facet of life inside this country. I am very, very excited to introduce our speakers tonight. And I want to start by saluting the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who we have the incredible honor of hearing from as one of our keynote speakers on tonight's program. And Chairman Omali Yeshitela was one of the co-founders of the African People's Socialist Party in 1972, was a heroic figure of the African Revolution in the 1960s, and has continued to lead uninterrupted for 50 plus years to rebuild the Black Revolution and to unite and liberate Africa and African people everywhere. And we salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela. The chairman is our chairman, the chairman of the African Revolution, the leader of the Uhuru movement, and our leader in the Uhuru Solidarity movement. So Uhuru to Chairman Omali Yeshitela. And I also want to salute our leadership deputy chair, Onezene Yeshitela, who leads the economic front and so many other things, leads so many aspects of the African People's Socialist Party's work throughout the world to make the vision of one Africa, one nation, to make the vision of African people's resources being back in the hands of African people themselves a concrete reality, who is the visionary architect behind the Black Power Blueprint program in St. Louis that has inspired thousands of people around the world to support it, to participate in it, and to do their own examples of African self-determination in building a Black working class economy. So we salute Deputy Chair Onezene Yeshitela and the entire African People's Socialist Party stretched across the globe, taking upon their shoulders the task of liberating African people and by extension, liberating all of humanity. So it is a profound honor to be a white person under the leadership of the African Revolution. And I want to salute my direct leadership, Penny Hess, chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, who came into this organization when it was first created by Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party in 1976, and who has represented the most principled stance of solidarity from a white person in unity with the African Revolution that any white person has ever taken in history, and who truly is a historic figure and a great example for us, all of us white people, to look to and to strive to emulate what it means to live, breathe, and fight for white solidarity with Black power every single day. So we're going to be hearing in just a minute from Chairwoman Penny Hess, the chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, which is the organization of white revolutionaries, cadres, under the leadership of the party that the chairman formed, as I mentioned, in 1976. And before we get to our incredible speakers tonight, I want to salute all of you out there in the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, our members, our friends, our supporters, and everyone who participated in the historic national March for Reparations to African people that took place just yesterday in 6 states throughout the United States, throughout this stolen indigenous land occupied by this entity called the United States, which included St. Petersburg, Florida, St. Louis, Missouri, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Portland, Oregon, and San Diego, California. And in those 6 cities and in those 6 states, white people marched under the leadership of the African Revolution, demanding reparations to African people as a revolutionary stand. So I want to salute all of the incredible comrades out there who made this March for Reparations happen, as well as everybody throughout the country and throughout the world who has contributed towards the Uhuru Solidarity Movement's March for Reparations pledge drive to raise $20,000, but now we're almost at $21,000 in material solidarity, reparations for the work of the Uhuru movement, in particular, the Black Power blueprint. So I want to applaud everybody for the great stance that you have taken up to this point in forwarding the struggle of African people to be free, not as a favor, not as an act of charity, but as an act of genuine solidarity with African people, which is in our interests and which is the future that we want to be a part of. So without any further ado, the event tonight is called The Revolution Will Not Be White-Led. And in 1976, Chairman Omali Yeshitela made that point loud and clear when he formed the African People's Solidarity Committee to organize white people to join under the leadership of and as a strategic front of the revolutionary party and strategy of the African working class. That organization was called the African People's Solidarity Committee. That organization has worked under the party and the chairman's leadership for 44 years, traveling throughout the world, speaking to the white population, writing the book, Overturning the Culture of Violence. And the person who has been at the helm of that committee under the chairman's leadership has been this incredible speaker that we're about to hear, Penny Hess, the chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee. So it is my great honor to introduce our first speaker, Penny Hess, chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee. Uhuru, Chairwoman Penny.
Uhuru, Uhuru, Chair Jesse. Really, really honored to be here today. What an amazing event and weekend. The days of reparations to African people in 6 cities, so powerful, really bringing home the mandate that we have under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party to win the white population to genuine solidarity with African liberation and reparations to African people, so powerful. And for raising $21,000 towards the work of the Black Power Blueprint. So I salute you, everybody who's here, everybody who was part of it. I have, it's a great honor, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, to be on this program with you. Thank you so much for coming on and for creating the African People's Solidarity Committee under the leadership of the Party of the African Working Class 44 years ago. It has been an incredible honor to have been part of that, to have been able to see the world and to see the future of this planet, of what it is and what it must be under the leadership of the revolutionary African working class. I want to join in also saluting Deputy Chair Omali Yeshitela, under whose office all of us in the African People's Solidarity Committee work, and who is the powerful visionary and as the architect of the Black Power Blueprint, who put it on the ground in such an amazing way that we will talk about a little bit more in this program. And all the other members of the African People's Socialist Party, I want to salute and thank to Chairwoman Simba, the incredible Economic Development Director of the Black Power Blueprint here in St. Louis, and International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement President Kalambai Andanet, both of who gave dynamic and electrifying presentations at our rally in March here in St. Louis. That was just so powerful yesterday. And I just really want to salute KC, Comrade KC, the Midwest regional organizer who just did an amazing job here leading the march, Comrade Leah in Minneapolis, Len in Philadelphia, Hallie up in Boston, Claudette in San Diego. Wow, 100 people, great media coverage. That was powerful. Comrade Mads up in Portland, and of course, Comrade Ali Ayello in St. Petersburg. Wow, this is really, really powerful. And we are talking about the revolution won't be white-led, and I would add to that, and why reparations is and must be a revolutionary demand. So many of us from the white community were thrust into action by the powerful resistance of the African working class following the police murder of George Floyd in May. And more white people came out to march, to stand in solidarity, to make themselves known publicly that they would stand in solidarity with the African community and justice for George Floyd and all Africans who have been murdered and otherwise terrorized by this colonial police force inside the borders of the United States that targets the African population. And you know, there's never been, not even in the 60s, the number of white people that came out to march as had happened here in June and even some in July. And that was powerful. But we also have to say that it is not enough to march. It is not enough to march. And Chairman, actually it's in the reading that he was taking on this morning, that, you know, has made the statement that over 50 years ago, that the chairman recognized and realized that the era of protest politics was over. And that doesn't mean that there's not marches and protests, because the African People's Socialist Party has led literally thousands of protests before anybody else was out there demonstrating, sometimes almost every few weeks or monthly, around the conditions and the police violence and the conditions of in the prisons that African people face, and in the communities, and for the issue of housing, and so many other fronts that African people face very intense oppression for inside this country. But that the chairman has taken it upon himself through 50 years of struggle to fight for the party of the African working class, no matter what, to take his understanding that we have to go beyond protests. The African population had to put a revolutionary organization and the infrastructure of political and economic power, dual and contending power, into the hands of the African working class inside the borders of the United States and around the world. And that's what he has dedicated himself to, that. And he took it upon himself to solve the problems of the revolution. And I want white people to hear this and to understand this, to say that we have to go deep into the question and the reasons why things are the way they are today. And we have to hear that from the leadership of the African working class. And we have to begin to see the world as the African workers and oppressed and colonized people around the world see it and experience it every day, not as we want to see it, not as we imagine that we would see it, but under the actual leadership of the African Revolution, which is the leading revolutionary force in the entire world today, as we can see. And that the chairman faced this just brutal defeat of the African Revolution of the 1960s by the US government, and took it on and said that he was going to sit down. Not sit down, actually. I mean, he sat down in the middle of the struggle, that with the unity of theory and practice. So he often wrote his deepest political writings in the midst of huge revolutionary campaigns that he was taking on, but that he was going to analyze and sum up with science and solve the problems of the revolution, because this time around, African people are going to win, and they are winning. And this is what we have the opportunity to be part of. And that I joined the African People's Solidarity Committee 44 years ago to be a revolutionary, to take on what had to be taken on. But I can't be a revolutionary by declaring that. I can only be a revolutionary under the revolutionary force of the African working class here and around the world, which is what the African People's Socialist Party represents. And it was in this process that the party and the chairman laid out that reparations is a revolutionary demand, and that it is not enough even for us to just march for reparations. We have to go much, much deeper than that. And we're talking about being under the leadership of the movement for national liberation of African people. They are very serious. The African People's Socialist Party is very, very serious about seizing power, that African people are going to seize the power, that they are redistributing the wealth of the world into the hands of the liberated African working class. And that is the essence of what reparations means. But for white people, we always have our out because we sit on this pedestal of the oppression of African people. We are the colonizer, we are the colonizer nation. And we can always go back onto the pedestal. And we have that choice, we have that ability, but the crisis of imperialism is deepening, and we are called on to play an incredibly strategic role in the revolution, in the African Revolution. We're part of the strategy. We have an assignment. We have work to do. We have to go into the belly of the beast. We have to organize other white people just like ourselves. We have to strip them away from the unity with white power, with imperialism, with parasitic capitalism, with the violence and rape and plunder that goes along with that we are expected to to have our unity with every single day, and that we get, our dreams and aspiration that comes at the expense of this reality, and that it is time for us to go deeper, to take a deeper commitment to go into the white community in a revolutionary way, to become the voice of Black power in white face, and to carry out the strategy that Chairman Omali Yeshitela has crafted and used. So what the chairman has taken on, and we can see this in the chairman's incredible political education that is every Sunday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern, in which the chairman deepens the understandings of African internationalism and the work of the party every week. It is so exciting, and certainly it was today. And if you have not been part of this, if you're out on the West Coast, and yes, it's 5 a.m., I've spent time out there, and it's so incredible to take the stand, to get up and be part of this study, and to see the kind of questions and discussions that are going on there. So these are some of the things that Chairman Omali Yeshitela has taken on and solved. He created a political line based on science, and that is African internationalism. That is the political theory, the political understanding that sees the world through the eyes of the African working class, that is able to take all the mystification, lies, and everything possible that imperialism does to take away the science and the ability of the oppressed and colonized people on the planet Earth to see the way to win their liberation. And that, this is a struggle that has been going on for hundreds of years, and it is going to win. It is going to win. And the chairman has given the people on the planet Earth the political clarity to be able to bring and win revolution and make revolution the main trend in the world again. So the political line based on science, African internationalism. The chairman also has taught us and proven as part of this line, that capitalism is parasitic. It is born on the assault on Africa. It is born on the genocide of the indigenous people. It is born on turning African people into commodities for sale and having the colonizer nation, that's us, having white people have control over life and death of the lives of African people. This is the reality. The chairman has shown that. And as he said in the book Vanguard, the chairman said capitalism was born in disrepute of the rapes, massacres, occupations, genocides, colonialism, and every despicable act humans are capable of inflicting. And couldn't say it better. You couldn't say it better, that this is what capitalism is. It cannot be reformed. It was born as a parasite. It continues to live and attempt to grow as a parasite. And that parasite is being brought down by the resistance of those who have been the colonized, who are the colonized, who are the African working class, the poor and oppressed people on the planet Earth have the ability and are bringing down parasitic capitalism and bringing about that must go into its grave forever. The chairman also brought out, and one of the earliest things that I remember from joining the African People's Solidarity Committee is the chairman's, teaching us, and even had pamphlets about colonialism, the question that the conditions facing African people inside the borders of the United States are colonialism. And that is so critical. And that means that the entire African nation is under colonialism, whether they are inside the borders of the United States or whether they are around the world in Africa or in Brazil or any other place, in the world. African people are colonized, and this is true inside the borders of the United States. And colonialism means that an entire people is occupied and dominated by a foreign and alien state power for profit, for exploitation, that it must produce life for everybody else. It must produce life for the colonizers, not for themselves, not for themselves. And that colonialism is the essence of violence. Everything about colonialism is violent. It is the state, as the chairman has said. It is the state, which is the institution of violence that supposedly stands above the state, but does not. It is there to, it is the military, the police, the prisons. It is there to violently protect the interests of the white ruling class and the capitalist system and the colonizer nation. And that if there is colonialism, it means we are the colonizers. All white people are the colonizers. And that we have to understand that versus racism. That everything about racism, as the chairman said, racism denies African people their nationality. It denies their struggle for power. It actually criminalizes the African community because it puts the question of the oppression of African people back onto them, and that they're supposed to, if they are supposed to do everything right and then come into a relationship with the white community. It is really, really insidious. It is there as part of counterinsurgency. The question of racism, which are merely the ideas in white people's heads, as Chairman Omali Yeshitela has told us. The question of racism, which is the predominant ideology of imperialism, is absolutely a self-defeating waste of time, Chairman Omali Yeshitela has said. It does not go anywhere. I mean, look at the whole thing of training, diversity training and anti-racist training for police departments. That's been going on for 40 years or more, that it absolutely does nothing, because the role of the state and the police is to oppress violently the African population and the colonized populations inside the borders of the United States. And that the question of racism is something that puts us in the center and that takes the leadership of African people out of it. And it reduces African people to people of color, or, some other, African American, or some other name besides African people colonized inside the borders of the United States. And it has been through this incredible period of resistance that we have seen subsequent to the police murder of George Floyd, the resistance of the African working class, and this incredible leadership that Chairman Omali Yeshitela has been putting out online, sometimes almost every day, that the question of colonialism is the key question. And we see this now becoming the pervasive word for the oppression of African people, the pervasive understanding that it is colonialism, and that it is much, much more than the question of racism, that the colonialism means that there can be a struggle and it can win. It can identify its enemies as the US ruling class and imperialism and the center of imperialism here and in Europe, and it can engage white people to take a principled stand, an organizational stand under the leadership of the Vanguard Party, to be part of this strategy, to play our role in fighting colonialism inside the borders of the United States as the key to the end of colonialism, the overturning of colonialism around the world. The chairman has also determined and showed us and showed scientifically that all white people sit on the pedestal of the oppression of African people, and the genocide of the indigenous people, and the colonial domination of people on the planet Earth. And as the chairman has said, every dream, every aspiration that a white person has is based on drone strikes in Pakistan and police murders inside the African community. It's based on African women and people being raped and murdered in Congo by the millions. It's based on African people living in starvation in the richest continent in the world. It is based on murder, mayhem, plunder, and rape around the world by the US government. That's what it takes for us to live the lifestyle that we take for granted. And we are the colonizer nation, all of us, even working white people. And the chairman has really, really shown this scientifically, that even the white working class was born on a pedestal of the assault on Africa and the incredible wealth of resources that were stolen and brought into Europe based on this ongoing assault and the enslavement of African people as the largest, most lucrative commodity of the time. And the chairman has taken on the question of the state, which he made popular in a Dead Prez record that is still popular today. He has brought out and educated the people, the masses of the African working class, and all of us, to what is the state. The state is not something that white people see or even necessarily experience, because the state is a colonial state. It is there. It is the basis of the two realities when it comes to prison, when it comes to the relationship to the police and everything else in this country. There is a colonial state. It is there to oppress African people and uphold the stolen wealth, and to protect it in the hands of the white ruling class and the white colonizer nation. And the chairman has also talked about and defined, the only person to define the question of counterinsurgency. The counterinsurgency, which is part of colonialism. It is part of the state. The counterinsurgency is not used against white people. The US, if the US was going to war against Europe, it would not use counterinsurgency. It would use a completely different kind of warfare. It would use war that was governed by the Geneva Convention, in which there's all these points about how prisoners of war should be taken and what kinds of things you can do or not do to civilian populations. None of that matters in a counterinsurgency. Counterinsurgency is an imperialist war against the oppressed and colonized population that is rising up for power in its own hands, rising up for national liberation, which is what happened in the Black Revolution of the 1960s. And the chairman has defined this and fought for it when no one else was out there saying that or summing up that that's what happened to the Black Revolution of the 1960s. As imperialism wanted to say, oh, it's over now. People, the African people got the vote and they got things they wanted and things are better, when actually the conditions in the African community were worse than they ever had been in the 1970s, 1980s, when African people were beaten down and the drugs, as part of the counterinsurgency, crack cocaine and other drugs, were infused into the African population, and the African People's Socialist Party was the only one out there struggling for that. And that, this is what the chairman has taught us that the vanguard does. This is what the vanguard does. It was never easy. It was never easy. It was always being out in front. And what we see now is that the ideas in the world are coming around to to understand what the chairman and the party has fought for so long. So, I do want to say that the question of counterinsurgency and white people and the state, white people have been part of that. White people are the state. We were the state before there were the police. We were the state before, before there was an even organized governmental body to carry out the wars of genocide against the indigenous people and to attack and maintain the colonial domination of African people. We were the state. We did that. Regular white people, we carried out the genocide. In some places in this country, 80% of the slaughter of indigenous people was carried out by regular white people, militias, white people with guns, The state of California paid $1 million a year for several years in the 1850s, right after they stole the land from Mexico, right after they found gold up there in the Sierras. They began a policy, a public policy of genocide towards African people, paid over $1 million a year to white people, bringing in scalps of slaughtered indigenous people. That's what we have done. That's what we have done. We carried this out, that we attacked and assaulted and had the power of life and death over African people before there was the police. And we have never been charged. To have a cop even charged is because of the resistance of African people. That was never the policy inside the borders of the United States. That, when I look at counterinsurgency, when I look at this violence, here in St. Louis, there was a General Harney, who owned African people, and he beat a woman, African woman, Hannah, to death because he couldn't find his keys. He couldn't find where he put his keys. And he beat Hannah to death. And he was never charged. In fact, there's a street named after him here. There's a street in St. Louis named after this General Harney who killed Hannah. And also here in St. Louis, there was an African man in 1830s who had won, quote unquote, his freedom from enslavement. Usually meant African people had to buy that, had to somehow figure out how to work and pay for that. He stepped off a boat. He came from the South. He stepped off a riverboat in St. Louis, walking down the street, and white people grabbed him and strapped him to a tree and burned him to death. And this was in 1837, the first, of tens of thousands of what's called lynchings here and around the South, but not just in the South, throughout the United States that white people perpetrated against African people. This is what we did. Women, children, grandmothers, wives participated, egged it on. We did this. It was fun. They had bands playing. They had souvenirs. Just the most incredible terror. And when I think of, counterinsurgency, I think of Abu Ghraib, those pictures of, white women in the army who were doing, chaining leashes to Arab people and making them walk like dogs, and they were naked. And they took pictures of it. It was funny. Or I think of Vietnam and My Lai and the Phoenix program and what they did to the people of Vietnam, of just throwing them out of planes into the town where they were from. They killed, the Phoenix program killed over 30,000, or I think even 40,000 of the secondary leadership of the Vietnam Workers' Party during the war. They call it the war inside the war. And that I think of the prisons inside the United States that we don't talk about, but we're complicit with it. That the US has the largest prison population on the planet, bigger than China, and India, and many other places and countries that have far larger population than we do. And the US likes to talk about the violation of human rights and the gulags. This is where it is. And that we're talking about the fact that 2.3 million people are in prison inside the US in a brutal, horrible, horrendous prisons where rat and roach infested, where the African people never see the light of day, where they are literally tortured in isolation or in these shoe units, special housing units that you can't even stand up straight in. They're so tiny. This is what is going on, torture inside the borders of the United States. And this is what it takes for us to live our lives. We're talking about the fact that 1 out of every 8 people in the entire world in prison is an African inside the United States. And we're talking about the fact that besides who is in prison in a year, on any given day, there are 2.3 million people in prison, but throughout a year, tied to jails, tied to courts, tied to parole, tied to probation, there's over 12, 13, 14 million people tied to that. And the majority of them are African, Mexican, indigenous, not white people. This is going on. And I'm saying this because the chairman has talked about, so much these elections and how white people are afraid of fascism and Trump. Well, the African community is under fascism. It is under colonialism, but we can walk right past it. And we're talking about a system, a colonial system, in order for us to live, must criminalize the entire African population and blame them for the violence that is inflicted by the colonialism that we allow to happen, that it starves people. Now, since COVID, They're saying 40% of the African community in the latest polls cannot feed their children. They cannot pay their rent. They're in poverty. They have no jobs. 40% of what was called the essential workers. So this is why the chairman had to create a strategy to deepen the crisis of imperialism. He created a strategy that also showed that the African working class had the most profound stand of international solidarity of anyone on the planet. And I mean that in seeing the party's relationship to the people of Nicaragua, the people of Iran when they were struggling, the Irish, the Palestinians, the indigenous people, that everything that the party has is theirs. They see the front of the Palestinians and all oppressed and colonized people as a front of the African revolution. The Mexican people, the relationship with Unión de Barrio, and so much more, that this has been the party's stand no matter what, to uphold international solidarity, and that the party had to create a party of the African working class grounded in the masses of African working people around the world. It had to build cadre. It had to have unity of theory and practice. It has the prolonged struggle of many, many years through many periods, and always come out on the top at a higher level through this, that yes, the party is working for independence in the chairman's lifetime, but it took a long time because African workers have time. Colonized people have time. It is imperialism that's in a crisis, and that everything that the party has done has been to intensify that crisis and build the power of the African working class. And it is the party that gave us the class definition of the African nation and the whole world, making us understand that the working class of the world is the African working class, the colonized working class, and that white working people are still the colonizer. And that this is why white working people, you know, who aren't Bill Gates and Bezos and all these people, but yet so many from the white working class have stood with the US government. And we see that today, you know, would be with Trump. But we have a responsibility to win them, because ultimately the ruling class doesn't care about them either, but that they have a choice, because the future of all of the issues and contradictions that white people face with US imperialism, with our ruling class, is going to be solved by and only by the victory of the African revolution. And that is why we have to be under the leadership of the African working class, which leads the revolution in the whole world. And that's why the party is built, as the chairman has been talking about in his political educations on Sunday, in the past couple of weeks, dual and contending power. And that's what the Black Power Blueprint is about. Political and economic power, not asking somebody, not begging somebody, creating it themselves, creating it through also and improved by or helped by the reparations that come in from white people who have unity with the power of the African working class, and the seizure of power by the leadership of the party of the African working class, the vanguard. And also part of the dual power are the programs such as the International Tribunal on Reparations to African People that indicts the US government worldwide, and the Black community control of the police and the Black grand jury, and all of these institutions that show and prove and enable African workers to see that they can govern themselves. They can do this themselves. And so, you know, we see the leadership of the entire revolutionary struggle inside the US and the world is the African People's Socialist Party. It is building true socialism, true workers' power that is under the leadership of the African working class. And that if we want to be not about some idea of democratic socialism or some kind of socialism for white people only, that can exist with Bernie Sanders and the US military and the state still going on, if we're serious about socialism, which is the only thing that can change and transform this world and end every form of oppression, and end forever a system built on slavery, built on oppression and the oppressors, and built on rape and plunder, then we must be under the African Revolution. And I look around and I see a lot of white despair. I see that, you know, hundreds of thousands of white people are dying through suicide, through drugs, through alcoholism, not seeing a future, and that, but that the future is not here. Imperialism's crisis is not our crisis, because we are part of the future that will be about the ability of all humanity to thrive, no one at the expense of anyone else. And I think about, I was reading the other day, the Che's presentation at the Tricontinental, it was called. And it was really one of his best presentations, where he said that they don't want peace, as the chairman has summed up so many times. They want 2, 3, many Vietnams. And that's where he made a statement that solidarity is not well-wishing, but sharing the same fate in victory or death. And that was a call for everyone to go in to struggle for revolution. Everyone has to struggle where they are for revolution. That's how we give solidarity. And that is why we have to go deeper. We have to win the question of reparations, because it is all owed. All the wealth of the system, all of imperialism must be destroyed. And the African working class is there, poised to assume that wealth, so that now it goes into the hands of the people and oppressed and colonized people around the world to be free and liberated. We have a job, a very, very exciting job to do. We have to go into the belly of the beast, as we have been doing so brilliantly in these demonstrations that we just saw. We have to go deeper. We have to win people. We have to win white people in the schools and the churches and our families, as many of you do. And we have to be able to be revolutionaries under the leadership of the African Revolution, Uhuru, and unity through reparations.
Uhuru. Wow. Thank you so much, Chairwoman Penny Hess. That was an absolutely spectacular presentation. And I just really, really appreciate everything and unite with everything that Chairwoman Penny just said. And if you're like me and you were sitting here nodding your head in agreement and just, you know, feeling total unity with all of what was just spoken, then I encourage you to join. This is not a talk fest. This is not information consumption. If you agree with what you just heard, you got to get involved. You got to join. You got to make the revolution happen where you are, as Chairwoman Penny said. And you can do that at uhurusolidarity.org. And we're going to talk more about that later when we talk about what it means to be a member of this organization. So I want to appreciate that presentation. So many incredible points that were made. So if we're down for real socialism, if we're down for genuine unity with power to the African working class, we have to fight for reparations to African people, because all of it is owed. So Uhuru, to Chairwoman Penny, thank you again for that incredible presentation. And it is now my incredible honor to introduce our next keynote speaker, our leadership, our chairman, the founder and leader of the Uhuru movement, a world-renowned revolutionary leader who has been fighting for the liberation of Africa and African people and all oppressed peoples around the world since the 1960s. He has never given up. He has never compromised. He has never sold out. He has always stayed true to the mission of socialism, of liberation for African people, of Black power to the African community. And it is Chairman Omali Yeshitela who made reparations a household word, starting with the World Tribunal for Reparations to African People in 1982. Reparations is being spoken everywhere today because of Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Colonialism is being talked about everywhere today because of Chairman Omali Yeshitela. So it is my great honor to introduce Chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, Chairman of the African Socialist International, founder and leader of the Uhuru movement, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru.
Uhuru Comrade Jesse. I'd like to offer my appreciation to you, to Comrade Chairwoman Penny Hess, for that extraordinary presentation she just made, and to the entire leadership of the Solidarity Movement, and more specifically in this moment, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement that's responsible for hosting this incredible webinar that we are participating in today. And I also think that it's extremely important. Someone has asked the question, what do we mean when we say the revolution will not be white-led? And one reason that can be confusing to some is because in this country and much of the world, we have been dragged into a certain kind of philosophical, idealistic, and subjective approach to understanding the world and what happens in the world. And that things happen because some people like some people and don't like other people because people are hateful, that kind of thing. And there's even a politic that's out there that says that what we have to do is simply teach everybody to love each other. And if everybody loved each other, it wouldn't be any kind of contradictions. And this is the ruling class. This is one of the means. This is a kind of message that comes from the ruling class that would obscure or liquidate the material basis for our oppression and the material basis of our exploitation. So when we talk about the fact that the revolution will not be white-led, it is much deeper than simply saying that we don't like white people, although a lot of people in the world don't like white people. And there are good reasons for that, but they are not because deep in somebody's heart that they have been smitten by Satan or some entity like that, but because of the relationship that Africans and oppressed people have to white people that's based on colonialism. Because Europe has rescued itself, the whole of Europe that rescued itself, has elevated itself to this state of superiority due to colonial slavery. And so what we're looking at is the whole world configuration, the whole configuration, economic, political of the planet Earth has its origin in the colonial enslavement of African people and oppressed peoples around the world. And what has happened is this obscene capture of power by Europe over the rest of us has resulted in other kinds of obscenities. The control of the economy of the world, the control of the politic of the world has allowed Europe and the oppressors to define what the world should look like, what people should think, and has even taught African people that we should hate ourselves and love our oppressors. And it's extraordinarily insidious. Some things are very obvious. It's obvious to us when we see a cop kill somebody like George Floyd in this grotesque way. I say a cop, but it's a domestic military force. That's what the police are in this country, is a domestic a colonial military force that's there for the purpose of containing this relationship that we have between the oppressed and the oppressors, to make sure this relationship endures, that the oppressor should never be free. And so, but this is obvious when you can see this, but there are some things that are not so obvious, and some things that would be missed, especially since for the longest period of time, we have a situation where white people have defined themselves and the rest of the world. So white people define themselves as white people, define themselves as subjects of history, and then has defined the rest of us as objects of history. So our significance is not unto itself. We are not significant unto ourselves. Our significance is only as it relates to how it improves or detracts from the conditions of the existence of white people or Europe or something to that effect. That's how everything has been defined under the dictatorship of the white ruling class internationally. So what we are talking about is a fight for science. So to say that there is a way that we can understand the world that free from these assumptions by the rulers of this country, that things are based on whether somebody likes each other or not, whether somebody reads the Bible or reads the Quran or engage in some other religious experience or practice. The fact is that is a material basis for the oppression of African people. There's a material basis for what's in white people's heads as it relates to Africans and other peoples around the world. It's not something that was inbred into white people, that there's some kind of genetic feature in white people that make white people have this assumption of superiority. It is, in fact, what has occurred is that white people owe their existence and their ability to feed, clothe, and house themselves through to a process that denies African people an ability to feed, clothe, and house ourselves. That the whole of Europe has lashed itself upon the body of humanity like the horrible virus that sucks the blood, sucks the resource. It's a parasite that has lashed onto us, and it has created wealth and sense of significance in what is now characterized as the white world. And it has come at the expense of the livelihood, the expense of the dignity, the expense of any assumption of sovereignty over African lives, over other oppressed peoples around the world. This is the relationship that we are looking at. So when we talk about the revolution will not be white-led, first of all, the first thing we're talking about is revolution. That revolution, that there is no way out of this situation that we are confronted with. All the people who claim that they hate Trump and they hate capitalism, that they hate the evils that surround the destruction of the environment, that they hate what the mistreatment of women, that they hate what the police do in our community, they hate the wars that's going around the world. What you are talking about is hating a social system. You cannot have peace resting on a foundation of colonial terror and violence. If you have a social system, the whole system comes into existence through colonial slavery. That's where it came from. People. I remember George Bush, the one who was president, who made this obscene statement about how people hate us because we are good. You can feed yourself that insanity if you like. But that's not why anybody hates white people. In fact, there was this guy, Brzezinski, who was an advisor to Obama, and who was the national security advisor for James Earl Carter when he was president, who made it quite clear that the peoples around the world don't hate America, don't hate Europe because of some extraordinarily philosophical or ideological conclusion that they've come from absent of what Europe has done, what America has done in terms of colonization, dominating the peoples of the world, and people can only see a way to freedom, to living a decent life by overturning this relationship. So that's what we're looking at. And that's the thing that this incredibly significant movement, this incredibly significant webinar is addressing. And this is the thing that brings science to this discussion, as it should bring to this discussion. So we're saying that, the world that we live in has its origin in colonial slavery. And this colonial slavery has brought wealth, has brought a sense of significance. It even brought a sense of sameness to white people around the world that people refer to as nationality. It's this process that has fed white people at the expense of everybody else. And every individual white person, or most individual white persons, when they look in a mirror, when they compare themselves to other white people, they know that they are not that significant. But when they compare themselves to Africans and the rest of the peoples of the world, this is one of the benefits of being a colonizer, that this assumption of some kind of a superiority. And it's a necessary kind of philosophical assumption. It is incentivized by the fact that everything that the white world has is stolen, is taken as a consequence of theft of resources from the indigenous people, not only in the United States, but throughout the Americas. It's a part of the process of even the Opium War that was fought against the people of China in the 1840s, that turned China into a nation of junkies because China refused to trade tea with England for opium that the British had. It is a part of that entire process that helped to shape the world that we're looking at today. This is what has created the economic and political configuration that people are trying to are actually breaking free from throughout the world. So what we see is a whole social system is in a state of severe crisis. And this crisis is made manifest 1,000 different ways. When I say a social system, I'm not just talking about what happens inside the United States. I am talking about what's happening in the world, because the world economy is essentially a capitalist economy, a world economy that has come into existence through colonial slavery. Karl Marx once said the fact that capitalism itself has its origin in turning Africa into a warren for the commercial hunting of black skins. This is where the capitalist system comes from. It comes as a consequence again of looting much of the world and creating economic and political structures to reinforce that, and to make sure that this resources continue sucked out of Africa, sucked out of Asia, sucked out of the Americas, and into the refrigerators and bank books, bank accounts, and into the infrastructure of Europe and now North America. And I say Europe, I shouldn't have to say New Zealand. I shouldn't have to say Australia. I shouldn't have to say Canada. I shouldn't have to say the United States, because that's the whole European project. And everything I just mentioned, I shouldn't have to say Israel. This is the whole European project in the sense that it was a part of a process that brought wealth, and everybody came to understand that the way you capture wealth, the way you grow your economy, is through enslaving human beings. It's through what they characterize as imperialism, which is a term that comes from the word empire. This is the world that we're living in. And it's necessary for us to achieve a scientific understanding of that, because there are people who would tell us that because we say that African people have to be free, because we say that the indigenous people have to be free, that this struggle is not about getting white people to like us, love us, or approve of us, but it's about the capture of political power by ourselves as colonized people, whether in terms of the entire African nation, which is dispersed around the world at gunpoint in various places, or whether we're talking about the indigenous people throughout the Americas, or in the barrios and domestic colonies of the United States and other places like that. That's the heart of the whole revolutionary struggle. And this is why when you see certain kinds of struggles reaching critical moments in history, we've seen how, generally speaking, what is characterized as the white working class acting in a way that to many has been confusing, because they seem to always unite, people would say, against their own interests. They would unite with some of the most reactionary political policies coming from this and other governments. You see it happening all over Europe right now. Most reactionary sectors of the political forces are now gaining traction among what's supposed to be the working people. Look at the United States, where there is an assumption, has been an assumption for a long time in many quarters, that somehow the Republican Party was the party of the rich, and the Democratic Party was the party of the working people. And that what you look at today, that none of this stuff makes any sense, because the Republican Party now is the party, obviously, of what they call white working class people. There are 40% or more of the white population in the United States who organize and will die for Donald Trump, and will kill for Donald Trump. I say Trump, but will kill for what they perceive as their own interests and rights as white people in this contest that Europe and America has with the rest of the peoples of the world. That's what it is that we're looking at. And so we're offering up people an opportunity to break free of that. You don't have to be mystified by this relationship. The fact is that the reason white people should be afraid is because imperialism is in deep straits, that it is in deep and profound crisis. And the reason imperialism, or the whole capitalist, or the whole world economy, this social system that dominates the world today, is in such a deep and profound crisis, is because the peoples of the world are breaking free from this parasite that has a death grip, and has had a death grip on peoples around the world for the last 500 or 600 years. That's the basis of the crisis. That's why there has to be permanent warfare that's going on today. Never-ending war is what you're looking at. And the US is leading wars all around the world. And there are various puppet regimes. There are various sectors of populations from colonized peoples who are locked at the hip with US and Western imperialism because they have they have opted into this relationship that come at the expense of their people. And the same thing is true with African people as well. So here's the social system that we have. It's a parasitic social system. It's a world economy that's called capitalism. Capitalism has its beginning, has its origin, not in some genius of white people, not in some maturation of some historical process inside Europe. Europe didn't create capitalism from within. Capitalism came as a consequence of imperialist European empire going out of Europe, capturing African people, capturing other people's territories, and transferring that people, that human and material wealth, that human and material, those human and material resources to Europe. And then in many instances, exporting some of the European colonizers into other territories like the Americas today, like Australia today. And so in these places that were inhabited by an indigenous population, now we see Europe spreading out and capturing all this wealth and this resource and creating what is known as capitalism. That's where it came from. There's nothing mysterious about the founding of capitalism. Now, you don't have to guess about where it came from. You don't have to make a determination whether you agree with Karl Marx or anything like that. The fact of the matter is that everything white people got, they got it through stealing from Africans and other oppressed peoples around the world. And when white people open up their refrigerators, what they see is food in that refrigerator that has been taken from the lives of people in Africa and people in the colonial ghettos and barrios inside this United States and from peoples around the world that has contributed to this remarkable situation where something like 80% of the people on Earth, 80% of the people on Earth are trying to survive off something like less than $10 US a day, and 50% of the people on Earth are trying to survive off $2.50 or less a day. And if you're looking at Africa, people work sometimes all day just for a single meal. That is not due to some genius of white people. That is not due to some fanciful notion that white people are so good that they have all these resources. It's how white people got this, how Europe got these resources is responsible for the creation of military forces, for armies, and for satellites that's shooting drones and killing people around the world, that is killing the George Floyds and oppressed people, Africans inside the United States and around the world. This is the kind of social system. And these entities like the police, like the intelligence organizations, as they call them, like the prison system that's bursting at the seams in the United States, with more people, Africans in prison in the United States than there are people in some countries in the world, in Africa and other places around the world. The reason that is so is not because Black people are bad and white people somehow able to live off the illusion of your goodness, even though white people dropped atomic bombs on civilians that murdered all kinds of people. White people created whole new ecosystems for the ocean with the trade in African people, with the number of Africans who were thrown off ships after being captured in the continent of Africa and being brought to this part of the world, people who were thrown off ships, people who jumped off ships, and sharks learned to follow them. The whole ecosystem of the oceans were changed as a consequence of that. This is what we are talking about. There's no crime, there's no depravity that's possible to be committed by human beings that has not been committed against African people in Africa and here in the United States. And speaking of that, we are one people. We are African people. And this whole notion that somehow, because we were brought to this territory that white people will now name Americans, that we are some hyphenated America, is madness. And it's an attempt to obscure our relationship to Africa and to other African people around the world and to the indigenous people of this land that has now been occupied by the imperialists. We are not some hyphenated Americans. We are Africans. We are not hyphenated Swedes. We are Africans. We are not Black Brits. We are not Afro-Colombians. We are African people plain and simple. And the conditions that we experience in Colombia, in Britain, in England, in the United States, etc., are conditions that are caused by the initial attack on Africa, the enslavement of Africa, the colonization of Africa, the dispersal of African people around the world. We took with us not only ourselves, but we took the condition that has been imposed on Africa with us to all these other places around the world. And we're not going to be able to get out of this except as a whole people making a struggle from every front. Just like Europe fights against the African revolution from every front. Yes, we have cops killing us in Minneapolis, in places like that. But we have cops, sometimes called Marines, that are killing us in other places around the world, in Somalia, killing us in Mali, killing us in Chad, in Africa, and other places like that. This is the reality that we are confronted with. This is the imposition of a horrible social system, state power over African people to maintain the status quo of poverty for the vast majority of the people of the world, poverty for Africa, and value for white people. And it seduces a huge sector of the North American white population. It seduces white people by corrupting their soul, corrupting their whole sense of who they are, by equating what they have with goodness, and that has been stolen from us, and the fact that we don't have it being characterized as another statement of the significance of white people who got it. So if they got it, then they are significant. They are valuable. And if we don't have it, it's because we are not significant like white people. This is the political line. This is the philosophy that has grown out of the way that the Europeans feed themselves through colonial slavery. So from this economic system, there is also spawned a superstructure of ideas, customs, and things like that. Even religion flows from this, that explains the world in a fashion that justifies this existence of a particular way that Europeans feed, clothe, and house themselves, send their children to school, build their cathedrals and churches, clean their streets and what have you. All of it is explained through this philosophy that people refer to sometimes as racism, white supremacy, white superiority, etc. But it is a natural consequence of people explaining the world based on their own material interests. So it is not that white people have certain kind of ideas and that has resulted in what we live with. It is that the white people taking this land, building an economy of stolen resources, stolen land, and living with that, that creates and forges these ideas and this understanding of the world that satisfies their own needs, their own aspirations, and their need to explain reality in a fashion that justifies who they are and what it is that they do in the world. So that's under assault. That's the thing that we are going to change. And it's not going to be white-led. It can't be white-led. And I want to say that when we talk about this, we're talking about real socialism. We're not talking about some Bernie Sanders claptrap or some Casio, whatever her name is, stuff. We are talking about an actual destruction of this relationship that we have. This whole notion of democratic socialism and the democratic socialist presupposes that somehow you can have socialism and capitalism coexisting in the same space. Somehow you can convince the oppressor to act differently. Somehow you can hold an election and call yourself a socialist and win an election, and that's going to make the difference in the world. And everything in history shows us that that's a lie. It doesn't work that way. That capitalism came at the expense of feudalism in Europe. That's one social system replacing another social system. Feudalism, if feudalism had survived, capitalism couldn't have come into existence. But capitalism was swept away. It was swept away by slavery. It was swept away by colonialism. It was swept away by the riches, that is to say feudalism, swept away by the riches that were now accumulated in the possession of these people, these new entrepreneurs and what have you, pirates and other forces who were raping the world and bringing those resources back to Europe, transforming reality inside Europe, transforming the social system of Europe, bringing for the first time what appears to be democracy, making feudalism something that was outdated. In other words, you had feudalism that was sacrificed on the altar of capitalism. Capitalism coming into existence. It negated feudalism. If you're going to have socialism, then capitalism has to be negated. It has to be destroyed. And if you're going to destroy capitalism, you have to destroy the pedestal that it rests on. Karl Marx once said that what he called wage slavery, which was the capitalist activity. He said wage slavery in Europe has as a pedestal slavery pure and simple in the New World. That wage slavery, that is capitalist activity in Europe, required as a pedestal, required slavery, required colonialism. And that hasn't changed. That the whole capitalist system rests upon a foundation of everything that's being stolen from Africa. Colonization is the slavery that they were talking about of African people here and around the world. Colonization of the peoples in Asia and throughout the Americas and what have you. This is why there's such a panic and such a frenzy to destroy what is happening in Venezuela. It's not because they don't like Maduro. It's because that what this means is it's breaking the links of the parasite. The parasite requires for its existence to be able to suck the blood and resources of a host. It starves people. It brutalizes people. It demoralizes people. It humiliates people. And sometimes it makes sport of this while it's doing all of these things. So this is what we're looking at when we look at capitalism. And this is what you say when you say Bernie Sanders says he's a socialist, he's a liar. Except that there was and has been this sort of utopian socialism. That's what the white people and the Marxists call it. Somehow you can have socialism by just convincing the rulers, convincing the capitalists that they ought to be better. You know, like the story of Christmas carols and Scrooge, who became to be symbolic of the capitalist system at that time, and would have these nightmares and what have you, and change his ways. This is the assumption of this kind of socialism, this utopian socialism, that somehow you get enough votes or you win the sympathy of the oppressor, and then that will make changes happen for the oppressed. That's a lie. And not only is it a lie, but most people who tell the lie know it's a lie. And they tell that lie because they can't tell that the way you really have to move to bring capitalism down is to destroy the pedestal, is to deny the parasite access to the host. And the host is the colonized people. The hosts are the colonized African people here in the United States and around the world. It is upon this that the whole capitalist system relies for its existence. So you see somebody say they are socialist, and they say that they refuse to work under the leadership of the colonizer of the world that's responsible for bringing this end to capitalism. They're not socialists. They just want a kind of gentler capitalism. They want a capitalism that they can live with. They want a capitalism that they don't have to be ashamed of. They want a capitalism where you can't see African people and others being treated badly. They want a capitalism that would say, you don't say nigger anymore, you say Mr. Nigger or something to that effect, but they don't want the destruction of capitalism because the destruction of capitalism makes them uncomfortable. And the fact is there is not going to be any revolution that's not going to make white people uncomfortable. If you're looking for a comfortable revolution, you're living in some kind of fantasy world. Of course you're going to be uncomfortable. Why shouldn't white people be uncomfortable? Everybody else on the planet Earth is uncomfortable living under these circumstances today. And white people have to join the rest of humanity and experience some of this discomfort in the process of bringing down the social system. And you do that under the leadership of the African working class, organized with this vehicle of its advanced attachment, the Revolutionary Party of the African People's Socialist Party. This is what we're talking about. We're saying down with utopianism, down with this utopian socialism. Let's go for real scientific socialism. When we say scientific socialism, we mean socialism that is based on materialism, on historical materialism, on a recognition that for there to be genuine socialism, that capitalism has to be destroyed. And that capitalism has its origin, has its genesis, is fed by, is maintained by sucking the resources of Africans and other peoples around the world. And yes, Africans, even in the United States, in the communities, in the cities where you live, Africans even in Minnesota, Africans where George Floyd was killed, Africans where Mike Brown was murdered, Africans where people are killed all around the world. It is a social system that requires this land that was stolen from the indigenous people. Somebody said, wow, some state says that a certain percentage of this territory is owned by the indigenous people. Hell, the whole thing is theirs. And it's been stolen. And genuine solidarity, genuine need to make a revolution means cleansing yourself. It means joining with the struggle to overturn the whole social system that puts power in the hands of the oppressed. And that's the only way you're going to see the social system destroyed. So if you're interested in bringing about a new social system, then you have to get to the root of the question. And the root of the question is colonialism. And the root of the question is the attack on Africa. And the root of the question is the dispersal of African people throughout the world, which is something that's going to result in a magnificent worldwide global revolutionary movement for socialism, because Africans are going to have to fight everywhere. And we are being organized every day under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. That's why we're in the United States. That's why we're throughout Europe. That's why we're in the Caribbean. That's why we're all over Africa and what have you. Part of a same revolutionary movement, pulling it all together, because our future, we have come to understand, will never be achieved beneficial to us as long as we are fighting with these definitions, colonial and borders and definitions that's been imposed on us by imperialist white power. We have to control our own definitions. We have to be able to chart our own course. We have to recognize that we are one people. We are one Africa that has been dispersed forcibly against our will. We are one nation, and the revolutionary process requires us to pull it all together to consolidate the African nation, to destroy this capitalist system. And it requires white people, the colonizer, to break with colonialism, and unite with the future, because the future belongs to those of us who are colonized, who are fighting on every continent to change the relationship that we have to imperialist white power. And if it doesn't seem that we're fighting on every continent to do that, it's because there's uneven development in terms of the revolutionary consciousness of our people. But everybody's fighting to this end. That's why you see same kinds of events happening everywhere. That's why it's necessary for the United States government to create this thing they call AFRICOM. That's in every country on the so-called country, these artificially created entities that contain sectors of our population. That's why there is a so-called AFRICOM, U.S. military presence everywhere. That's why hundreds of U.S. military troops are roaming across Africa to now engage in actual warfare to maintain this status quo, because we are the future. We are the force that's going to bring it all down. And what we are saying is that the Europeans, North Americans, white people can participate in this process of bringing it down and create a new world where people can live again without having to oppress or exploit anybody. That's what we can do. That means that it's good that people are protesting. I believe in protests. I think that when masses of people go to the streets, as we've seen happening in the United States over the last several months in particular, especially heating up in like June of this year, especially really after May 25th murder of George Floyd, you saw a resurgence of what had begun in Ferguson in 2014. I love these protests. I believe that we should be involved in the protests, but it's not just protests. The thing that makes protests important is because it heightens the fighting capacity of the people. The people learn how to fight in certain ways when they engage in these protests. And it makes the people less gun-shy, less fearful of the oppressor to engage in that fashion. But that's not enough, because what we have is a whole bunch of people willing to protest. We have all kinds of anarchists. And when I say anarchists now, I'm talking about white folk who join it because they have their own gripes. That sometimes they just don't like authority, and that's what they're fighting about. And sometimes they leave the comfort of their homes and tree-lined streets to join in protests, and sometimes they'll burn this and burn that. But the question we are confronted with is to what end? To what end the protest? And if the end is not the destruction of colonialism and the negation of the colonial domination of Africans and other peoples around the world that would give rise to the advent of socialism, then it's just some activity that you do to satisfy yourself. You can get a high adrenaline high off of it, but it's not necessarily something that's beneficial to the people. Our party, the African People's Socialist Party, has recognized for a long time that there are several factors that's necessary to make a revolution. One, you have to have crisis, and there's no way that you can deny that crisis abounds throughout this world. In fact, crisis, you can't see people making a revolution. If there's no crisis, why make a revolution if everything is hunky-dory, so to speak? But there has to be crisis, and that's one of the conditions for revolution. The people have to have come to a conclusion that the ruling class has to be unable to rule in the same old way. And it's true. The ruling class here and around the world, they can't rule in the way they used to rule. It is shaky. They're on shaky footing almost every place. There's splits. There are splits abound throughout the international imperialist ruling class. There are competitions heating up. Different thugs engage in intra-capitalist confrontation and struggle. That's something that's true. And they can't rule in the same old way. And then another thing that's necessary for revolution is that people have to come to the conclusion that anything is better than this. I'd rather be dead than to live like this. And I'm willing to, you see children who will fight tanks with rocks. We've seen that happen. We've seen it happen in Palestine. We've seen it happen in South Africa, where the people will rise up and will face any problem, any enemy. They've come to that conclusion, the end of the rope. But the other thing that's really critical to make revolution is to have a revolutionary party that is guided by advanced revolutionary theory. That advanced revolutionary theory is African internationalism, because it gets to the source of the contradiction. It gets to place that Marx never could get to. It gets to place Lenin never could get to. And I'm not somebody who's dissing Lenin or Marx or anything like that. What I'm saying is that Marxism and Leninism came into existence at a time where Africans did not have a voice. We could not even participate in the discussion about what it was to make revolution, what revolution would look like. And now that we can, we've captured our voice. We've been able to look at the world as it impacts us. And we can say this, well, in many instances without the kind of intimidation that was associated with being absolutely and totally under colonial domination, that we have discovered our own brains and we have said, this is the way that we have to go in order to affect the freedom that we are looking for as a people. So that's what we're talking about. And we have, in the party, we solved so many of the outstanding political and ideological questions that's confronted the revolutionary movement over the last, I don't know how long, since the advent, since the Marcus Garvey, if you will, because 100 years ago, Marcus Garvey built an incredible movement. And some people now who would say something, who would ask a question about the validity of an all-African revolutionary movement can only do that because the imperialists, along with their minions, along with the opportunists in our own community, along with the African petty bourgeoisie, attacked the Garvey movement that had built all around the world, with more than 11 members and followers all around the world on virtually every continent. There were members of the Universal African Improvement Association. So we're not talking about some mysterious thing that might happen. It did exist. And a lot of forces, including from the African community, including some people who are held up as these great leaders like W.E.B. Du Bois, they worked to destroy the Garvey movement, including people who were associated with the African Blood Brotherhood, who was nothing but a front for the Communist Party USA. They attacked the Garvey movement and they attacked the whole assumption of African nationality that spread across the globe with all kinds of caricatures of science, that all kinds of caricatures of national definition that somehow determined that African people, depending on where you are, you have become some other entity. If you are in the United States, then what has happened is that your national homeland is no longer Africa, but it's in certain territories in the United States where you picked a lot of cotton and engage in other kinds of demeaning and horrific, oppressive labor conditions. This is now, they say, your homeland. They come up with the artifices like now you don't have Africa is not your homeland, Ghana is your homeland. Africa is not your homeland, Jamaica is your homeland. And all of these contrivances that serve to fracture the consciousness of the African nation so that we are not able to easily to come to conclusion in what's in the best interest of Africa and our people. But the African People's Socialist Party has been fighting this struggle for almost 50 years. And that we have become custodians of the international African revolution. And we are fighting on every front. And this is key to the victory of socialism over capitalism. This is key to the destruction of a social system that's responsible for war, that's responsible for the assault, ongoing assault on the environment, that's responsible for the brutality that we see imposed on people, not only in this country, but around the world. We are engaged in that. And again, it's not just a protest politic, it's a to what end? And the socialism can be achieved that people talk about, but it has to be achieved as a consequence of destroying the pedestal upon which this whole capitalist edifice rests, and that's colonialism. We say that this is really important for people to understand the party's role in developing the whole movement for reparations. We did it. I say this without hesitation. I say this without any concern that somebody is going to be able to reasonably refute that. I'm not saying that we were the first one to come up with the demand for reparations. That's obviously not the case. I'm not saying that there were not people who were doing reparations work before the advent of the party. No, that's not the case either. In fact, we have seen reparations work done before the party took on this question. But what we saw before the party took on this question was reparations, first of all, was talked about as something that was due African people just due to slavery. That's the labor that was stolen from African people through slavery, one. Two, the second thing that was important is that they saw reparations coming as a consequence of some legislative body or some judicial ruling that was going to give people reparations. And we've supported virtually every legislation and every effort that's being made by people for judicial recourse. But we've always understood that the real way to get reparations is going to be through mobilizing the African masses ourselves. That African people, once concluding that reparations are due to us, we will do everything to get reparations. We would get rid of anything that blocks our capacity to take reparations. And so this demand that we make for reparations also allows for white people to make the most profound criticism or self-criticism, if you will, of their colonial relationship to African people by joining this struggle for reparations. It's a revolutionary demand. That's what we're fighting for. We're not looking for some kind of reparations that ultimately will come, and then you'll have Africans with reparations living on this part of town and colonialism existing on that part of town. The struggle for reparations is a struggle to negate. It's to kill the parasite. It's to take the resources that the parasite is sucking from those of us who are the hosts, and taking those resources and rebuilding our lives with our own resources that's been taken from our oppressors with the intent of actually eliminating the power of colonialism and capitalism in our lives. We call it a struggle for dual power, which is a strategic approach to winning power. Dual power, you spell it D-U-A-L, dual power, or you spell it D-U-E-L, which is a power that recognizes that is a power that's in contention with the existing colonial power. That's what we're fighting for. And so the party can take responsibility for that. We are the ones who took the reparations question out of the closet. We organized the first reparations tribunal in history in Brooklyn, New York in 1982. We created international judges. We brought people to testify, to actually quantify the amount of value that's been stolen from African people over the years. We brought historians to show how much better life was for Africa and African people before the attack on Africa by white power and white people as such. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a scientific approach to this question. And we have to draw the line, because it's so much easier for us to say black and white unite and fight. It's so much easier for us to just call on everybody to just get along together. And people really have really fuzzy feelings and feel good about doing that. But you have to draw the line, because if we don't draw the line, people don't know what side to be on. They don't know there's more than one side to this question. They think this is a question about leftists. I mean, we're no leftists. There's a whole concept now of black leftists. You know, there's white leftists and there's black leftists. You know, like there are white feminists and black feminists or something to that effect. We're not leftists. Leftist is some assumption of a contest that happens within a common united society. On one society, you have people who've been considered on one sector as progressive on the left, and others who are not progressive or conservative or reactionary on the right. We're not progressive. We're not part of that European society. The whole capitalist society rests upon the foundation of our oppression. We are not leftists. We want to overturn the colonization, whether it's left or right colonialism. It's all colonialism. We're not somebody who is engaged even in a struggle against fascism. And people will denounce us and say, well, look at Trump. Trump is a fascist, and fascism is right around the corner. And it is true that things are getting worse and worse every day, but this is a consequence of the crisis of imperialism. And every time imperialism faces crisis, you see this kind of thing happen. But for African people to tell us that somehow we're experiencing fascism and we have to turn our struggle into one against fascism is ridiculous. So we've seen the struggle against what they call fascism. When we saw France fighting against what they call fascism, at the same time it was engaged in a struggle against German fascism. It was brutalizing and oppressing and killing the colonized people in Vietnam. It was killing and brutalizing the colonized people in Algeria and other places in Africa. These were anti-fascists who were doing that. So the question for us is not who is a fascist and who is democratic. The question for us is who is colonizer? What is the colonial oppression? If colonialism exists, it doesn't matter if it's left colonialism or right colonialism. There is no such thing as a good colonialism. But when people try to drag us into the struggle, saying that what we're fighting against is fascism, they're trying to get us to unite with one sector of the ruling class of the white power, of the colonial powers against another sector. That doesn't serve us, that serves them. We have to be able to fight for our own power. And that's why the African People's Socialist Party, the African Socialist International, which is an organization of African revolutionaries around the world under a single leadership that we created, that's what we are about. And that's what the African, the People's Solidarity Committee and the Uhuru Solidarity Movement are about. It is about revolutionary transformation based on science, not based on some superstition, not based on some let everybody get along together kind of nonsense that might make you feel fuzzy, but it doesn't change a damn thing. We have to uproot a social system, and we're on the right trajectory to make this happen. And this is why we say that revolution will not be white-led. To be white-led is to make the assumption that we will continue over and over again, just like we have in the past, to turn every struggle into a fight for white rights. That's what the struggle against fascism is. It's a struggle for white rights. That's what the struggle for so-called women's struggle is, a struggle for white rights. That's what the worker struggle, as it's characterized, if it doesn't deal with parasitism as the fundamental issue, is a struggle for white rights. And so you have this struggle that they call for socialism. What it really is a struggle for white rights. It's what it was called in Germany and some other place, a national socialism. And you know what the consequence of that was. So what has to happen is that this struggle has to be under the leadership of the African colonized people and other colonized peoples around the world. This is where the class struggle, in fact, is really concentrated in the colonial question. And so it will not be white-led. It is going to be led by the African working class in the form of its advanced detachment, in the form of its revolutionary party, in the form of its general staff. It's going to have to be led by the revolution, the African proletariat. And so everybody should be working with and joining with the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. All of you should be joining this movement. All of you should be a part of the Uhuru movement in one way or another, and recognize that we're involved in a protracted struggle. Just because you're angry, just because you're pissed off, just because you woke up yesterday and understood that the environment was under assault, just because yesterday you didn't like the last picture you saw of somebody mistreating an African, doesn't mean that you're going to change it tomorrow. It means that you have to lock into a struggle that is based on a revolutionary strategy, revolutionary science that has a to what end attached to it. Because it's not good enough just to get involved in some kind of fight. We're not in it for the fight, we're in for the victory. And to be victorious means that you have to become African internationalists. To be victorious means that you have to make the struggle under the leadership of the African working class. And that's why we say all power to the people and Black power to the African working class. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Uhuru. All power to the people. Black power to the African working class. Unity through reparations. Thank you so much, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, for that incredible presentation. Just want to express my absolute unity. And the revolution will not be white-led. The revolution will be led by the African working class. The African People's Socialist Party is being led by the African working class and by Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the vanguard of the African Revolution and worldwide socialist revolution for all oppressed and colonized workers. So thank you so much, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. And I want to echo that profound call for any white people who are tuned into this today, who are not yet members of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, to join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And we're about to talk about what that means and how you can do that. And before we do, I just want to let people know that you can ask questions of our two incredible panelists, Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Chairwoman Penny, in just a few minutes after we go through a quick presentation on how you can join, how you can contribute. You can get involved in this discussion. There's a little Q&A feature. I see we have a few comments and questions already. And we will be, and also people on Facebook and YouTube, if you're watching, you can put your comments in the comment section, and we will pose those questions to our incredible speakers. So we really appreciate it, and we're very honored to have Chairman Omali Yeshitela with us today, and just want to again salute that absolutely phenomenal presentation. And now I'm going to turn it over to Ali Ayello, who was one of the incredible March for Reparations leaders yesterday here in St. Petersburg, Florida, led a powerful mobilization from City Hall to Vinoy Park, where we had the honor of hearing from Chairman Omali Yeshitela, as well as other leaders from the African People's Socialist Party, Director Akile Anai, and others who stood with the call for reparations to African people. And Ali Ayello is also a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee and the chair of membership and recruitment for the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. So Ali is going to talk to us about what it means to be a member, what it means to pay reparations to African people, and how we can do that right now. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Comrade Ali Ayello. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Well, what an honor it is to be in this discussion today. I just really want to give a huge salute to Chairman Omali Yeshitela for that incredibly brilliant presentation that he just made. I have full unity with it and really, really want to salute that presentation and just the overall leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela. I want to salute Deputy Chair Ona Zane Yeshitela, the architect of the Black Power Blueprint, who I'm going to be with the project I'm going to be telling you about today. I want to salute Chairwoman Penny Hess for also another incredible presentation and showing us and embodying to us as white people what it means to be a white person in solidarity with the African Revolution. And I also want to salute our amazing chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, Chair Jesse Neville. And I am really thrilled to be able to talk to you all about membership and about how you can pay reparations today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, let me put it in present mode. Okay, so I want to make a call to everyone here today to take a stand for reparations to African people. You know, this is not just a webinar, but this is a call to action. And I want to talk to you about how you can take action today. And that is through paying reparations to African people and to joining organization under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. And today we have a goal of winning 10 new members to the Uhuru Solidarity Movement and raising $1,000 in reparations to African people. And we want you to go ahead and do this during the broadcast. While I'm speaking, I know you are all already mobilized from these incredible presentations that we had today. And so go ahead and go to uhurusolidarity.org and you can get started, and we will announce your name at the end and give you a shout out and a thank you for becoming a member or for donating and contributing, paying reparations towards our $1,000 goal tonight. And the first thing I want to talk to you about is being a member. And becoming a member contributes to our $1,000 goal, because membership, the basis of our membership in USM is paying reparations, is standing in material solidarity with the African people. And to talk to you briefly about what it means to be a member of USM and our principles of unity, in the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, we have 3 principles of unity. 1, we are under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. We get the honor of being able to work under this incredible revolutionary leadership, under the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela. This becomes our leadership in the Solidarity Movement when we join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. Number 2, and I apologize for my voice. I was out marching yesterday and I lost it a little bit. But number 2, we organize in the white community for reparations to African people. This is our responsibility that the African People's Socialist Party has given us, to go behind enemy lines and to raise reparations, to raise resources, as the chairman talked about, to negate the power of this colonial, parasitic, capitalist system. And number 3, we stand in solidarity with African self-determination and the right for African people to be free. And I want to show you some photos of what it looks like to be a member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement through the March for Reparations to African People. And in doing that, I want to salute all the amazing members and comrades in USM who helped to put on these marches in the 6 different cities around the country. It was absolutely incredible. And it was such an honor to be a part of it and march through the streets in our own white communities to raise the demand for reparations to African people, and to see the unity that so many white people have, whether they were in the march or they were standing on the streets or sitting in their cars, honking their horns, cheering in unity. It was incredible to see. So here are some photos of our marches that we put out today. We didn't sugarcoat the line. We went out there with the line, with the demand of the African working class for white reparations to African people, to stop colonial violence, smash colonial violence, make Wall Street pay reparations, and really fighting that it is colonialism. So here are some photos from St. Louis. So salute to Comrade KC out in St. Louis, who led this march. We also have a photo from St. Pete, demanding reparations now. For our comrades, there's Chair Jesse in St. Pete. And we have Director Akile there as well. This is in Philadelphia, talking about the MOVE bombing that happened, demanding that these universities in Philadelphia pay reparations, that Bank of America must pay reparations. We've got Portland out here. So these are our comrades marching through the streets, demanding reparations for African people. This is what it looks like to be a member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, to take that stand. And, I don't have photos from every city, but we're consolidating those. But these are just some great ones that I wanted to share with all of you. And what I wanted to say about being a member, whether you're out in the streets marching or you're paying reparations to African people, having this card right here the Uhuru Solidarity Movement membership card. This is how you take a stand. This is how you take a stand. This is how you say no more genocide in my name. This is our Uhuru Solidarity Movement membership card. And when you become a member of USM, you get one of these. This is your proof to the world. This is what you carry around in your wallet and say, this is what I stand for. This now represents you. And what it says on the back of our cards, it says, the owner of this card stands in solidarity with the righteous struggle of Africans and oppressed peoples everywhere for liberation and self-determination. So if you unite with that and you say, I want to be one of those people, then I want to call on you to join. I want to call on you to get organized under the leadership of the African working class. Because if you united with these presentations today and you united with the fact that the revolution will not be white-led, and and as the chairman said, I thought it was so powerful how he ended it, that you're not just pissed off, but you're in it for the victory of the African working class and the colonized peoples of the world. And you need to get yourself one of these membership cards. You need to start paying reparations today and become a member. And the different membership levels that we have, well, actually, I'm going to talk about the different membership levels that we have at the end. But the next thing but I definitely want to call on you to become a member of USM. And what I wanted to share with you is what reparations looks like. Reparations looks like power in the hands of the African working class. African People's Socialist Party, under the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Deputy Chair Onizane Yeshitela, who leads all of the economic institutions of the African People's Socialist Party, has developed over 50 self-determination institutions. And these institutions represent power in the hands of the African working class. And I want to show you some photos of one of the most incredible projects. You won't see anything like this on the planet Earth, which is the Black Power Blueprint. And the Black Power Blueprint consists of a community center, community spaces, community gardens, African independence workforce program where people are coming out of the prison system, being housed and trained, a One Africa, One Nation marketplace. And I wanted to share some photos with you of the community out in the community, organizing and working with the Black Power Blueprint and the impact that it's had. And here is a group of comrades and members of Impedum who are out there, along with the president of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, an incredible revolutionary leader, President Colombaye Ndiaye, who are standing outside the Uhuru House, this incredible community center and office space, and they're handing out a newspaper called Black St. Louis Speaks, which the party published and has brilliant statements from the community on what the Black Power Blueprint means to them. It's redefining north side of St. Louis, and not through gentrification. It's redeveloping it and putting the power in the hands of the African working class. So here's some forces that are members of the community that are handing out a newspaper that speaks to their interests, Black St. Louis Speaks. On the right-hand side, you see members of the community and from construction companies that are working on the housing, apartments and housing as part of the African Independence Workforce Program. On the next slide, the movement, the Black Power Blueprint, is taking, my chat is going on. We see the Black Power Blueprint is demolishing different buildings. And we see the African flag there, the red, black, and green flag. And what that means to the community is so incredibly powerful, as well as on the right-hand side, we see people working in the garden. The garden that community members can come and it's called the Gary Brooks Community Garden, and it's got amazing vegetables and trees being planted, bringing so much life to the north side of St. Louis. So this is, when you pay reparations, this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like when the chairman talks about dual and contending power. This is the reality of it. This is it on the ground. So I wanted to share these incredible photos with you. And if you want to become a member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, or pay reparations today, which I know every single person in this webinar does, you can go to uhurusolidarity.org. And on the top right, you will see two big red buttons. One that says become a member, which you can do to become a member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And the other one says pay reparations, which you can do to pay reparations. So go to our website, uhurusolidarity.org, and contribute to our goal of winning 10 new members tonight and raising $1,000 in resources. I know we can do it. I know we can do it with the support of everyone in this webinar and that's tuning in on Facebook and YouTube. And just want to give another salute to the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, to Chairman Omali Yeshitela, and to the incredible presentations that we heard here today. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Uhuru, thank you. Ali Ayello, Comrade Membership Coordinator for the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And please definitely go to uhurusolidarity.org. Click that big red button that says pay reparations. Click that big red button that says become a member and join the African Revolution today. Pay reparations to the African Revolution, material solidarity with African self-determination. And many people already have done that. And we are going to be shouting you out and announcing your contribution and or your membership before we close out in just a few minutes when we end this event tonight. So go ahead and go to uhurusolidarity.org and join those who have already gone, and we thank you, and we will thank you by name in a few minutes. So thank you very much, Ali. And I want to bring back on now Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Chairwoman Penny Hess. We have about 10 minutes for discussion before we close out. We have our announcements and close out the event. So let's see. Okay, Uhuru, Chairwoman Penny.
Uhuru.
And let's see if, do we still have, okay, and Uhuru Chairman.
Uhuru, come in.
Uhuru, I just really want to salute Chairman. What an electrifying presentation, Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you. That was, yes, and the party is in it not for the fight, but the victory. Very powerful. Just Uhuru.
Uhuru, I unite 100%. Just want to salute both of these presentations from you, Chairman, and from Chairwoman Penny. And we do have a question. This one is directed to the Chairman, and of course we can open it up to both of our speakers as well. This is from Wendy Snyder in Oakland, California. And Wendy says, Uhuru Chairman, I so appreciate your clarity and am so honored to be an Uhuru Solidarity Movement member. Can you please break down this term, intersectionality, and how it obscures the real issues? So many people I work with in education love this term.
No kidding. Uhuru, thank you so much. Comment, Wendy. It's good to hear from you. And we're extraordinarily pleased that you in the work as well. But this whole question of intersectionality is just another way of what you've just said to obscure the fundamental contradiction in this country. And it's a way to say that the oppression of Africans and indigenous people really is not so special, that there is this intersectionality that everybody more or less has a problem, and how this is how they all intersect. And the women have problems, and the homosexuals have problems, and the Black people have some. Of course, Black people are not women or homosexuals, and all these other people have problems, and there's just all this intersection. This is what we have to really discover, like this intersection, how they all intersect. And that's ridiculous. Of course, the contradictions are normal and natural in any society. We recognize that. But we also recognize that there are main contradictions around which all the others revolve. You can't give every contradiction. You can't say that they're all equal. The primary contradiction that exists in the world is that contradiction between oppressed and oppressor nations. That's the fundamental contradiction. That's what we just defined is the pedestal and the capitalism that rests upon that pedestal. All white people sit on that pedestal. Homosexuals, women, infirm, old, young, all kinds of people sit on that pedestal, are part of the oppressor nation, are part of the colonizers, despite the fact that they may face contradictions inside the societies that they live. But the contradictions that they face owe their existence to this main contradiction between the colonized and the colonizer. That's the contradiction that fuels every other contradiction. So they're not all the same. It's not like everybody's got a problem, and therefore what it does is to neutralize the main problem. If everybody's got a problem, then nobody really has a special problem, et cetera. And that's what it serves to do. And it's a bit of treachery in some ways. I think the thing's called sophism, a certain kind of philosophical sophism, you know, and it's another form of obscurantism. But I want to say that there's a reason the African People's Socialist Party is here 50 years later, just about. There's a reason that when you see all the other forces, and I'm talking about people who I knew, I know some of them who are still alive today, groups, organizations that they don't exist anymore, if they exist, they're shells of what they used to be, is because when the struggle hit, and this is why you are important, this is why the people who are in this meeting, the people who are talking about USM are so important, is because when this counterinsurgency war was initiated and really escalated against the African Revolution, we didn't start a fight against fascism. What we did was we opened up a new front. We opened up another front of anti-colonial struggle. We took the anti-colonial struggle into the white community, into the white society, into the white homes, into white families, and et cetera, with the creation of the African People's Solidarity Committee that's resulted in the existence of Uhuru Solidarity Movement. We open up another front, and that's why you are so important. Because when you come into this movement, you are now conscious of your role, your responsibility of changing the world. And this is why also you can be sure that one of the attacks on the party always is directed, come at us through the Solidarity Movement. It's the white people who do this, the white people do that. And this is based on the traditional suspicions and other kinds of contradictions that exist between white people and African people. People play on that, and they don't have access to the science, but we do. And what they are saying is that the existence of, they hate APSC because the APSC, they hate the fact that we continue to exist, that we defy everything, that we didn't simply fold up, we didn't simply go on the ground, we just opened up new fronts of struggle and took the struggle, spread it out and more to the white community, to the colonizer community. Colonizers now talking about reparations. We just saw in 6 different states in this country, solidarity, white people marching down the streets, talking about reparations, of reparations with African people, talking about down with colonialism, talking about Black community control of the police. White people were doing that. That's a magnificent advance in the movement, and it's something that's been going on for 40 some odd years since the founding of the African People's Solidarity Committee. So I just wanted to say that I think it's important, and I think it's important for those people who are in this meeting, people who we're talking about needing to join USM, you need to do that because of what you mean in terms of this overall struggle that we're involved in and the important role that you play, because we are redefining what it is to be revolutionary and what it is to be progressive in this country. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you, Chairman. Chairwoman Penny, anything you wanted to add or comment?
Not to that, but thank you, Wendy. And thank you, Chairman, for answering that.
Uhuru. So we don't currently have any other questions. We did have a comment on Facebook from Renata Jenkins. This was in response to one of the statements that the chairman made. Renata wrote, "African people have been made uncomfortable our whole existence in America. The entire institution of colonialism needs to be brought down.
Damn it, bring it down. Bring it all down.
Yes. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Uhuru, Chairman, there's something that you talk about a lot and you've written about a lot, and you know, this whole question that colonialism means, and African people in particular have produced life for white people and for other people, but not for themselves. And, you know, when I just think about that and what that really means, that, you know, that it means that the colonizers have determined everything about the lives of African people, of the colonized, white people, what it takes to produce life for us, you know, just the violence that it takes to do that. And I mean, I just think that that is such a profound thing, that all, and this is essence in so many ways to this question of reparations, because African people have given their own reproduction and production for us and continue to do that every day. And that it takes this just overwhelming violence to maintain that. You know,
all of us, and white people too, must engage in the most fierce kind of criticism of colonialism. Mm-hmm. And to engage in a criticism of colonialism means to engage in a criticism of a colonizer. And the fact is that colonialism has to be destroyed. When you destroy colonialism, you destroy the colonizer and the colonized. There is no longer either of us, but colonial, as Fanon would have said, and that we have to engage in fierce criticism. We cannot leave it untouched. We cannot treat this in some kind and gentle way. The criticism of colonialism has to be fierce and relentless, and everybody should engage in that. And this shouldn't be just a thing left up to African people, etc. White people like you, Comrade Penny, and like you, Comrade Jesse, need to make fundamental, profound criticism of colonialism and of the colonizer. And this is what is going to take for us to overturn it. And this is what's happening increasingly. Because if you don't, people still are making those criticisms. People are making those criticisms that a white woman was just beheaded in France just the other day for this horrible, offensive thing that French persons think they can do. And just this degrading, humiliating thing that they've done with the Prophet Muhammad. And this thing that they do in Florida with, in the United States with using indigenous people as symbols for their sports games and stuff like that. It's the most vicious kind of insult. And what does it mean to the spirit of the oppressed people to have to face this kind of garbage every day? And the only thing that keeps us from cutting your heads off and taking it down is that people have to recognize that there's a colonial state that we have to deal with as well. And until we're able to deal with that colonial state, many of us have not prepared to do it. But you know, this is colonialism, and people will say that we got a right to defame your most precious beliefs. We got a right to do that in freedom of speech. We got a right to depict you in the way we want to. It's freedom of speech. You know, it's white power. You are the colonizer, and you hold life and death control over us that gives you the temerity to even think you can do. You wouldn't even believe in freedom of speech. If you didn't have the gun, you won't come in the dark in the African community and talk that freedom of speech stuff and try to humiliate Black people or try to humiliate Muslims on their own community, on their own terms. You do it because you think you got the power we got white power behind you. That's your freedom of speech. And that's the reality that most of us recognize. So it's nonsense. I'm sorry I interrupted you, Comrade Penny, but this thing is so pervasive and ubiquitous. Just the power of colonialism over the lives of the oppressed peoples around the world. It's not going to happen anymore. And people are breaking out of it, and that's the reality. And there are not enough military forces that Trump has, and not enough duplicity of Joe Biden with the Negroes at his side. There's not going to be any way that any of this can be dismissed any longer. People want freedom. Yeah.
Can't be stopped. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you so much, Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Chairwoman Penny Hess. We're coming to the end of our program today. I just wanted to see if there's anything else you would like to say before we wrap it up tonight.
I just want to call on everybody to come out on November 7th and 8th to the Black is Back Coalition mobilization in Washington, D.C. It's going to be a magnificent rally at Malcolm X Park at noon on the 7th, which is a Saturday, and then it's going to be a march from there to the White House, and another rally at Lafayette Park across the street. And the theme title of this mobilization is going to be Black Power Matters, and come out and make that statement that Black Power Matters. It's going to be down with colonialism and Black community control of the police. So we're calling on everybody to join with us in that mobilization. We'll be exercising all of these protocols to try and prevent any kind of contagion. That's by the minor virus. The big virus, of course, is one that we have to take on, and that is colonial capitalism itself. So please come out with us. And for more information, go to blackisbackcoalition.org, blackisbackcoalition.org. And free all the political prisoners. Free all the political prisoners. Turn them all loose. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you, Chairman. And I want to second that we need to have a major contingent of the Reparations solidarity crew at the Black is Back. It is really, really important that we're there out in front of the White House, the Lafayette Square, I think it is, Malcolm X Park, starting out, marching through the streets of Washington, D.C. under the leadership of the Black is Back Coalition, and standing in solidarity with all the demands of Black Power Matters. And so, yeah, I want to second that and call on people to join that. And also, I want to really urge everyone who's not a member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement to go ahead and go to uhurusolidarity.org and join, become a member, become a part of the growing movement of white people who have come to see that our future is in the liberation of Africa and African people and oppressed and colonized peoples on the planet Earth, that no longer will we be the willing foot soldiers of this vicious, violent colonial system. So I, just want to say unity through reparations, and thank you very much, Chairman Omali Yeshitela.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Israel too.
Africa.
Uhuru. Thank you so much, Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Chairwoman Penny Hess. I know we can't hear the applause because we're on Zoom, but I know everybody is applauding. So we want to appreciate these incredible speakers and leaders, and really salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Chairwoman Penny Hess for being with us tonight. And we're coming to the end of our program, and I want to thank all of you who tuned in and all of you who donated, all of you who contributed reparations. That includes Janice Camp, who put in $50,
all right.
who put in $50, Kyle Weiss, who put in $50, Leah Fifield, who just led the March for Reparations in Minneapolis, who put in $25, Mads Ambrose, who just led the March for Reparations in Portland, who put in $10. I will be putting in $50, and Amanda Carlozzi, our vice chair of USM, will also be putting in $50. So Uhuru, that brings us up to $285. So we want to encourage people who haven't contributed yet to go to uhurusolidarity.org and give whatever you can in reparations to the Black Power Blueprint and the African Revolution. And if you're not a member, become a member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement today. And now I'd like to bring us to some announcements. And sorry. Okay. So Chairman Omali Yeshitela conducts a political education class, a 2-hour study called Omali Taught Me, every single week, and has been doing this for years. So you can spend some time on YouTube watching hours and hours of incredible political education of African internationalism provided by Chairman Omali Yeshitela going back several years now. And the chairman still carries this out every Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you go to the chairman's Facebook page, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, or to youtube.com/theburningspear, you can get connected with those studies, get notifications every week, and tune in. And they're absolutely profound. There's no better way to start your day on Sunday and to start your week, your upcoming week, than to spend it in a revolutionary classroom with Chairman Omali Yeshitela. I also want to echo the call for everyone watching this to register and plan to attend and mobilize for the Black People's March on the White House, sponsored by the Black is Back Coalition, and the conference that will follow it on November 6th through the 8th. And as the chairman mentioned, you can go to blackisbackcoalition.org for more information. And also want to give a shout out to the Reparations in Action radio show and podcast broadcast live every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Black Power 96.3 WBPU LP, St. Petersburg, Florida. We're very honored to have a program to discuss white solidarity with Black Power every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Salute to our amazing host, Jamie Simpson, and Chairwoman Penny Hess is a recurring guest on that program as well. So it's an incredible show. We definitely encourage people to tune in every single week. And finally, I want to encourage you to register to join an online study hosted by the African People's Solidarity Committee on the importance of being a cadre in the revolutionary struggle and how we must build white solidarity with Black power in these times. And it's a call for white people to go beyond protest, join the struggle under the leadership of the African Revolution, and join the African People's Solidarity Committee. That's going to be held on Wednesday, October 28th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can register by going to tinyurl.com/cadre versus counterinsurgency. And more information will be released in the coming days about that study. So keep an eye on the Uhuru Solidarity Movement Facebook page. Keep an eye on your email and on African People's Solidarity Committee's Facebook page for more details about that study. And I, again, want to salute our amazing leadership, the African People's Socialist Party, our incredible presentations today from Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Chairwoman Penny Hess. I want to salute all of you. We're going to build this movement, as it was stated so eloquently by our speakers tonight. It's going to take more than a march. We have to build we have to get organized and build the movement for reparations to African people from the white community under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. This is our future. This is the future for all humanity. And this is what we want to fight for and live for. And that is what it means to join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. So thank you so much, everybody. And we want to close by saying unity through reparations.